World War III doesn't start with a mushroom cloud. It starts when the ship's Wi-Fi cuts out and the GPS coordinates on your stateroom TV freeze. You're in the middle of the ocean with 3,000 strangers, and the bridge isn't answering questions about why the satellite link is dead. Look at the horizon. There's no signal, no traffic, and the luxury liner beneath your feet just transformed into a 100,000-ton island of uncertainty. Here are 5 survival trade-offs of staying on a cruise ship during a global conflict, ranked from the least decisive factor to the one that determines if you ever reach land. In a world where global trade routes fracture and satellite navigation goes dark, you aren't just a passenger anymore. You're a resident of a floating city designed to last exactly 10 days. The proof is in the loading docks you saw at the terminal. Those thousands of shrink-wrapped pallets are the only thing between you and a hollowed-out hull. If the trucks stop at the port, the clock starts on the ship. Number 5, the logistics buffer. This ship is a massive, mobile warehouse of high-calorie resources that makes it one of the best-stocked places on Earth for the first 72 hours. You'd think the food runs out fast, but these vessels carry enough frozen backstock in the deep freeze lockers to keep everyone fed for weeks if the kitchens stop the buffet waste and start rationing. The proof is in the storage lockers below the waterline, where industrial-grade desalination plants provide a massive head start over any urban center. While a city grocery store goes bare in 48 hours because of just-in-time delivery, you're still drinking fresh water pulled straight from the sea, processed through reverse osmosis and powered by massive diesel generators. This ship is effectively a floating fortress of inventory. But here's the catch. That buffer is a high-maintenance miracle that depends on constant, uninterrupted power. The moment the engines fail or the fuel is prioritized for movement over refrigeration, your frozen inventory starts a terminal countdown toward rot. You'll smell it before you see it, the scent of thawing meat and spoiled dairy wafting through the ventilation shafts. Most people will celebrate the initial abundance of the first few days, treating it like an extended vacation, but the smarter move is to identify the shelf-stable items like rice, flour, and canned goods before the party atmosphere turns into a desperate scramble. If you're on a ship right now, find the secondary storage areas away from the main dining rooms. That's where the real survival stock, the stuff that doesn't need a freezer, is actually held. This logistical head start is a major perk, but it's temporary, which is why it ranks below the harder reality of where this vessel can actually go. If this kind of breakdown helps you see the trap before it closes, like the video and follow along so you're ready for the next shift in the signal. Number 4, port denial and sovereign friction. Your ship is a mobile refuge right up until it needs to touch land, and that's when you realize you're on a vessel with no country. In a global conflict, national borders don't just close, they harden into steel. You see it in the historical logs of the mid-20th century, and you see it in modern maritime friction. No coastal city wants a ship with 3,000 hungry mouths to feed docking at their pier during a national emergency. The proof is in the quarantine logs, where ships were turned away by a single patrol boat or a shuttered harbor because the local governor decided their own residents came first. You might have the range to reach a neutral territory, but if local resources are tight, your luxury liner is viewed as a liability, or worse, a target for military requisitioning. This creates a massive bottleneck where you're puddle jumping from one closed port to the next while burning through your limited fuel. Imagine the silence on the bridge as the captain receives one docking denied message after another. You think you're heading for a safe harbor, but you might find yourself anchored 5 miles offshore, watching the lights of a city through binoculars that refuses to let you in. If you're in this position, don't wait for the captain to find a perfect high-end tourist dock. The better play is to monitor the horizon for smaller, less congested industrial piers or private island tenders that aren't on the primary naval map. The friction of international diplomacy makes the ship a floating island of uncertainty, which is more dangerous than the logistical limits because you can't outrun a closed border. However, the environment inside the hull is even more pressing because you're trapped with 3,000 potential vectors for disaster. Number 3, the sanitation and medical bottleneck. A cruise ship is a closed-loop ecosystem, and in a crisis, that loop becomes a noose. Most people focus on the buffet, but the real threat is the plumbing and the infirmary. The proof is in how fast a simple norovirus outbreak can sideline a modern vessel. Now imagine that happening when the shoreside medical supply chain is severed and there are no medevac helicopters coming. You have a medical center designed for minor injuries and seasickness, not for managing a prolonged respiratory outbreak or chronic disease for 3,000 people over several months. When the sanitation systems, which rely on complex chemical treatments and automated pumps, begin to lag, the ship becomes a biological hazard. Think about the geometry of the ship. One failing pump in the graywater system can turn 1,000 staterooms into an unlivable swamp of sewage in a single afternoon. The catch is that you can't just open a window and fix the air quality in a massive steel superstructure. You are entirely dependent on the HVAC system to filter out the smells and the pathogens. If you're planning a trip, your immediate move is to pack a personal sanitation kit with bleach, heavy-duty gloves, and waste-sealing bags. Most passengers will wait for a crew member to fix a leak, while you're the one who understands that when the system fails, it fails for everyone at once. This internal decay is more immediate than port denial because it happens in your living space, but it's still secondary to the one thing that keeps the ship's heart beating. Number 2, the fuel and propulsion clock. Energy is the only thing standing between you and a drifting steel coffin. A cruise ship is a thermodynamic monster that survives by burning massive amounts of bunker fuel to keep the lights on and the hull moving away from storms. The proof is in the fuel gauge. Even at hotel load, where the ship is just keeping the life support and water plants on without moving, you are burning through reserves at a rate that would shock most land dwellers. We're talking about tons of fuel per hour just to keep the air breathable. In a major conflict, fuel isn't just expensive, it's a strategic asset that navies will seize or destroy to cripple logistics. If the tankers stop moving in the Red Sea or the Strait of Hormuz, the clock on your ship starts ticking towards zero. This is the ultimate countdown, because every hour you spend idling offshore is an hour of life support you're throwing away. The bottleneck is the lack of a plan B for power. You can't put up sails on a 100,000-ton vessel, and you can't paddle it to shore. If the news of global escalation breaks while you're at sea, you need to be looking at the bunker reports, not the dinner menu. The safer call is to push for a destination with its own fuel refinery or a massive storage depot before the global supply is diverted to military use. If the fuel runs out before you hit land, the ship's strengths, the water, the light, the safety, reverse instantly. That's why the fuel clock is more decisive than sanitation. You can't pump sewage or clean water without the engines. But even with a full tank, there's one factor that can sink the ship from the inside out. Number 1. Command discipline and social order. The strongest hull in the world will fail if the people inside it stop believing in the chain of command. A cruise ship is a high-density environment with limited exits and almost zero private security, meaning the thin veneer of a vacation is the only thing keeping 3,000 stressed people from turning on each other. The proof is in every historical maritime disaster. The moment the passengers realize the bridge doesn't have a plan, the social contract dissolves. If the captain loses his nerve, or if the crew, who have families of their own in potential war zones, decides to prioritize their own survival over the ship's manifest, the vessel becomes a floating Lord of the Flies scenario. This is the ultimate force multiplier of disaster. This is the number 1 factor because it's the only one that can't be fixed with a spare part, a full tank of gas, or a luggy port. Command discipline is what keeps the food rationed and the fuel managed. If that breaks, the logistics buffer is looted and destroyed in an hour. You think you're safe because of the steel walls, but you're actually only as safe as the leadership on the bridge. The better move than finding a life vest is finding the calm, capable people on board and forming a cohesive block that can support the cruise authority and maintain order. This beats the fuel clock because even a drifting ship can be survived with order, but a fueled ship with a riot on board is a death trap. A cruise ship is a brilliant short-term refuge that buys you 72 hours of safety, but it becomes a catastrophic prison the longer you stay aboard. It buys you time, but it doesn't buy you a future unless you use those first few days to get to a sustainable piece of ground. Your task for tonight is simple. Go to your luggage and pack a shoreside deck with cash, a physical map of common port regions, and basic water purification tablets. If you were stuck on a ship today, do you trust the person in the cabin next to you to stay calm when the buffet finally closes? Tell me your plan for those first 48 hours in the comments.